In 11 days, Russian bombers dropped 8 bombs on the territory of Belgorod region. This is reported by the local residents themselves. The main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine published an intercepted phone conversation of a Russian woman describing to her interlocutor fires at infrastructure facilities in the region as a result of hostilities and the Russian army bombing its own citizens.
Russian aviation continues to strike the civilian population of Ukraine using aerial bombs equipped with planning and correction modules. Due to the technical imperfection of Russian devices, some bombs fail to follow the intended course and end up falling on the heads of Russians living in border areas. And here is the message from the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine on Telegram.
Ukrainian intelligence also published footage of the precise work of the Prymary Special Forces Unit. In the Donetsk region, they successfully struck Russian air defense systems. The main intelligence directorate stated that over 2 weeks in the Ukrainian Donbas, drone operators destroyed the occupiers' Tor M1 surface-to-air missile system, a command post from the S-400 complex, as well as a radar station from the Buk M3 system. Since the beginning of the day, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine has recorded 81 combat engagements. The Russian army is most actively assaulting in the Pokrovsk, Kostiantynivka, and Sloviansk directions. What old tactic are the Russians using in southern Ukraine to create the impression of a victorious offensive? And what do analysts say about the ratio of Russia's military losses to the territories it has captured? We'll tell you more next.
Russian troops are gradually losing control over Kupiansk in the Kharkiv region. This was stated by the Joint Forces grouping. Ukrainian forces continue clearing operations in the northern districts of the city, while the Russian army units that remain in Kupiansk have been left without proper supplies and are now in more difficult conditions than the Ukrainian forces were previously.
Communication for Russian troops has been cut off. It now takes place only via drones. Attempts to resupply or drive vehicles into the northern districts are effectively blocked by Ukrainian strikes. In other words, they cannot effectively supply the troops that remain in the city, but they can drop certain supplies or ammunition to them. Viktor Trigubov, head of the communications department of the Joint Forces Group, speaking live on the United News Marathon.
According to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, the Russian army stormed the positions of Ukraine's defense forces 81 times along the entire front line over the past day. In the Kostiantynivka direction, the enemy attacked 15 times. The defense forces repelled another 9 Russian assaults on the Sloviansk section of the front, while in the Alexandrivka area, Russian troops tried to break through the Ukrainian defenders' lines 7 times near 5 settlements. On the Pokrovsk bridgehead, Russian occupiers attempted 18 times to push Ukrainian armed forces soldiers from their positions. According to the Ukrainian military command, fighting took place in the areas of 10 settlements. Military experts are convinced that the Ukrainian army is capable of holding back the enemy in this direction, as is clearly demonstrated by the statistics from the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. After all, Russian losses are significant, while their territorial gains are quite modest, analysts say.
The situation there is described by the term patchwork front. That is, in the southern part of Pokrovsk, our units often operate literally surrounded, but nevertheless are able to receive the necessary resources in a timely manner to conduct these very combat operations. In the northern part, beyond the railway, right in Pokrovsk itself, it is now Russian units that often find themselves surrounded and are forced to fight defensive battles under such conditions. But the key factor, in my opinion, that will continue to influence the situation on the battlefield in this sector of the front is the enemy's attempts to finally close the shoulders of the operational semi-encirclement.
The occupiers continue to raise Russian flags to convince others of their victorious advance, experts say. In particular, the enemy is using this tactic today in southern Ukraine, in the Hulyai direction.
The Russians are trying to hang up their tricolor rags in those ruins, not the ones they capture, but the ones we leave behind for tactical reasons, because the fortifications are destroyed. Obviously, this is a good, let's put it this way, a handy marker for our spotters who then adjust fire accordingly so these strikes hit Russian personnel.
Meanwhile, the total losses of the Russian occupiers have already exceeded 1,159,000 people. Of these, 1,160 were eliminated in the past 24 hours, according to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. According to their data, yesterday the Russians also lost 2 more tanks, 3 armored fighting vehicles and 17 artillery systems. 2 air defense systems and a multiple launch rocket system were also destroyed, as well as more than 200 drones and over 70 vehicles.
One person was injured as a result of the nighttime attack on the Odessa region. The Russians launched a massive drone strike on the region. Explosions thundered in several cities. According to the regional military administration, energy and port infrastructure were damaged, as well as several civilian vessels. On the Romanian bank of the Danube, an evacuation was announced due to Russia's nighttime attack on Ukraine. People are being evacuated from two settlements, the village of Cetalchioi and the village of Plauru. The latter is located directly across from the Ukrainian city of Izmail, whose port was attacked by the Russians. As a result of the strike, a fire broke out on a liquefied gas tanker. The emergency services in Romania announced that there is a high risk of explosion within a 5-kilometer radius around Plauru, and the area must be evacuated immediately. About 20 people were also evacuated from the neighboring village of Cetalchioi, according to local authorities. The situation was also commented on by the Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
The brutal escalation of terror by Russia threatens not only Ukraine but also our neighbors. This underscores the need for collective pressure on Moscow to end the war. Andriy Sybiha, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, on the social network X.
Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has convened a meeting of the Government Committee on National Security for Tuesday. This happened after an incident on the railway. This morning, an explosion occurred on the route between Warsaw and Lublin. One of the train drivers noticed the damage to the tracks in time and stopped the train. Tusk called the incident an act of sabotage. For his part, Poland's Minister of Special Services Tomasz Siemoniak emphasized that the line where the incident occurred is used to transport humanitarian cargo to Ukraine. Therefore, the best specialists have been brought in to investigate the sabotage.
The likelihood that this is being carried out at the behest of foreign intelligence services is very high. This is also underscored by data from prosecutors. Such incidents show that those behind this have decided to start a new phase of threats to railway infrastructure.
Ukraine's Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha, commenting on the railway explosion in Poland, suggested that this could be another hybrid attack by Russia, and offered the Ukrainian side's assistance in the investigation. Europe, understanding the threats, is strengthening its defenses in all directions, preparing for possible aggression from the Russian Federation. For example, in Lithuania, which regularly faces Russian cyber attacks, they have decided to act proactively. The country is creating dozens of cybersecurity centers. And the European Commission warns that there may be only a few years left before a potential strike against NATO. Nikita Skoblikov will continue the story.
In 2024, the head of the Kremlin could give the order to attack NATO. This forecast was given by European Commissioner for Defense Andrius Kubilius at a conference in Vilnius. He stated that the most likely targets for the Russian dictator are the Baltic states. Currently, German and American troops are stationed in Lithuania on a rotational basis, but according to the European Commissioner, the presence of a battalion of Ukrainian forces there would provide an additional guarantee of security for the country.
We need to work together to strengthen our defense and develop such important projects together with Ukraine. Why do we need to create the Eastern Guard together with Ukraine? Because only in this way can we learn from Ukraine not just about drone production, but also about building an entire defense system. Because wars are won precisely thanks to defense systems, not just technologies or drones. And secondly, if border countries start creating the Eastern Guard together with Ukraine, this knowledge about modern warfare will begin to spread to other regions of the European Union.
While Russia does not dare to launch an open attack, it is ramping up its hybrid aggression against Europe. Espionage, flights of so-called unidentified UAVs over the territories of European countries, cyber attacks, all of this has already become a familiar backdrop. The states that border Russia feel the threat especially acutely and are therefore accelerating the strengthening of their borders. Lithuania is among the first. The country is preparing to deploy dozens of cybersecurity centers across its entire territory. On
Monday, the Ministry of Defense presented plans to establish 44 cybersecurity operation centers across the country as part of a large-scale effort to strengthen Lithuania's digital defense. Rokas Jonikas, director of the Cybersecurity Operations Department at the National Cybersecurity Center, stated in May that the goal is to establish regional centers in every county within 3.5 years. From a publication by the Lithuanian national broadcaster,
today, Europe has to fend off not only Moscow's digital attacks. In EU and NATO countries, actual acts of sabotage are being recorded with increasing frequency. Poland, which regularly accuses the Kremlin of organizing such operations and detains those involved, has reported a new incident. On a railway line leading to the Ukrainian border, unknown individuals damaged the tracks.
We are at the exclusion site. We
are at the site of the explosion, not far from Garwolin, near Mika station. Most likely the explosion was intended to derail a train on the Warsaw-Deblin line. Unfortunately, there is no doubt that we are dealing with an act of sabotage. Fortunately, there was no tragedy, but the situation is extremely serious. The police, prosecutors, and experts are working at the scene. They are investigating all the details of this case. Unfortunately, as we now know, a similar incident could have happened to the southeast of this location.
It is openly stated that Russia is waging a hybrid war with Europe in various countries. Many European countries are facing incursions by Russian drones as well as fighter jets. As the president of Finland noted, the line between peace and war has become quite blurred.
Russia is waging not only a physical war against Ukraine but also a hybrid war in Europe. The line between war and peace is blurred. Russia is trying to destabilize Europe, to sow chaos and panic using arson, vandalism, and propaganda. Alexander Stubb, the president of Finland, made this statement in an interview.
The only leader in Europe who openly disagrees with his colleagues' assessments regarding the threat from Russia is Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán. In a podcast with German bloggers, he stated that the fear of a possible Russian attack on the EU or NATO is laughable. Because, according to him, Russia is supposedly too weak for new aggression. Analysts are convinced that Orbán is merely pretending not to notice the danger. In reality, he continues to play into the Kremlin's hands and adapt to Putin.
Orbán, of course, understands the level of threats, but right now he wants to do everything possible to prevent Europe from rising up and drawing the right conclusions from the situation. He sees that Russia is now directly threatening Europe. It's obvious, for example, they're sending drones all over Europe in the most strategic locations to show that this is possible and that it will continue. In other words, Orbán now wants to deliver some generous gifts to all the Kremlin's fifth columns in Europe.
Analysts note that Orbán's attempts to lull Europe into complacency are not working. On the contrary, countries are strengthening their coordination. Denmark has announced its participation in the NATO High Visibility Project, which provides for the standardization of 155mm artillery shells. The country's defense minister, Troels Lund Poulsen, has already signed a declaration of intent together with alliance partners.
At a joint press conference with Finnish President Alexander Stubb in Brussels, Mark Rutte noted that the alliance is awaiting the results of the investigation and will be ready to act afterwards.
We are in close contact with the Polish authorities. NATO and Poland are actively cooperating on this issue. And of course, now we need to wait for the results of the investigation. Now is the time to increase pressure on Russia, both militarily and financially.
In turn, Finnish President Alexander Stubb stated that supporting Ukraine and strengthening NATO's defense remain among the top priorities. The Finnish leader emphasized that Russia continues to attack the civilian infrastructure of peaceful Ukrainian cities and shows no willingness to negotiate. Therefore, assistance to Ukraine should continue. Stubb expressed hope that the European Union would be able to resolve the issue of funding for Kiev before the European Union summit scheduled for December.
Ukraine's financial needs for the coming years must be addressed urgently and without delay. It is clear that Russia will remain a long-term threat to the security and stability of Europe even after the war in Ukraine ends. NATO and Europe must continue to strengthen their defenses in order to respond to and be able to counter such threats.
Meanwhile, the president of the European Commission stated that there are several options for financing Ukraine. Ursula von der Leyen addressed EU leaders and called on the bloc's countries to agree by December on a plan to cover Ukraine's military and financial needs for the next 2 years. The amount in question is 135.7 billion euros, based on the assumption that the war will end in 2026.
Right now, the main thing is to quickly reach clear commitments to provide Ukraine with the necessary funding, which will be agreed upon at the next European Council meeting in December. There are 3 main options for supporting Ukraine. voluntary bilateral contributions from member states, joint EU-level debt, and a reparations loan based on immobilized Russian assets. Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, in a letter to EU leaders.
For his part, Emmanuel Macron emphasized that the new generation SAMP-RT systems with improved capabilities are currently in development, and according to the agreements, Ukraine will receive them before any other customer countries, even before France itself. The president noted that the deliveries are planned both for the next 2 years and for the long term.
We need to strengthen the Ukrainian army so that it itself becomes a deterrent. France and the United Kingdom have taken the lead on this issue, but we encourage everyone. What is the model for training and strengthening the Ukrainian military? This will be a collective reflection by the chiefs of staff of our countries. All coalition countries have joined the discussion. It is necessary to provide Kyiv with such weaponry that it would deter Russia from wanting to attack Ukraine. We believe that Ukraine is an important link in our defense and in our pursuit of peace.
It is symbolic that Presidents Volodymyr Zelensky and Emmanuel Macron signed the agreement on the runway of the Villa Coublay Air Base, not far from Paris, where the Ukrainian leader arrived today for a visit. Larissa Petruk will tell you more about Volodymyr Zelensky's visit to France.
Even on the eve of his visit to France, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called the upcoming agreement with his French counterpart historic.
There will be a significant strengthening of our combat aviation, our air defense, and our other defense capabilities, a good outcome for the visit. This is what truly helps Ukraine defend itself and achieve our goals, our objectives.
On the morning of November 17th, Volodymyr Zelensky and his team landed at the Villa Coublay Air Base in the suburbs of Paris. He was met there by Emmanuel Macron, Reuters, citing its own sources, reports that negotiations between the parties had been ongoing for the past several weeks. Kyiv insisted that Paris could provide more military support for Ukraine's air defense. As a result, the parties signed a declaration: Ukraine will receive Rafale fighter jets, SAM-PT air defense systems, radars for these systems, air-to-air missiles and aerial bombs. The cooperation plan between the countries is outlined for the next 10 years. The agreements cover not only the transfer of weapons, but also joint Ukrainian-French production.
Already this year, joint projects between our defense industries will begin. We will jointly produce interceptor drones and work on developing critical technologies and components that can be integrated into Ukrainian drones. New aircraft, new reinforcements, new steps to strengthen our army and our country. Volodymyr Zelensky, President of Ukraine, on Telegram.
Unnamed sources from Reuters claim that some of the Rafale fighter jets may come directly from French reserves. The rest will be delivered by Paris in the long term.
According to the Élysée Palace, this agreement, designed for a period of about 10 years, provides for possible future contracts for Ukraine to acquire new French defense equipment. About 100 Rafale fighter jets with corresponding armaments. As clarified by the French President's administration, the agreement also includes new purchases of high-precision AASM Hammer aerial bombs and drones, according to Le Figaro.
France began operating fourth-generation Rafale combat aircraft back in 2001. They have long been exported to India, Egypt, Qatar, Greece, and Croatia. The aircraft can be equipped with a wide range of munitions. Among them are air-to-air missiles and high-precision bombs. Experts note that the advantages of the Rafale are its versatility, reliability, and combat effectiveness.
You are demonstrating your readiness for peace. Only Russia continues the war. The intensification of strikes on Ukraine's critical infrastructure is further evidence of this cynicism and aggression. Because every attack on the civilian population today is proof that Russia aims to take your territories under its control. Russia's commitment to war compels us to accelerate peace. And this peace must be created by all of us, Europeans. We must not miss a single opportunity, just like the United States and all countries that adhere to the UN Charter.
Emmanuel Macron noted that France's support for Ukraine is not limited to supplying weapons. It also includes allocating funds for the restoration of Ukraine's critical infrastructure under Russian shelling, and cooperation in the field of railway transportation. In addition, Paris pledges to continue working with its partners to strengthen sanctions against the aggressor. With
Casa France and all of free Europe, the United States and other countries around the world are helping us. From Canada to Asian countries, from Japan to Latin American countries, we have created one of the largest coalitions for the defense of life. Unity works, which is why we are able to shoot down Russian missiles. We are able to stop Russian assaults on the front lines every day. We are restoring our energy sector. It is very hard for us, very difficult, but we are rebuilding our infrastructure when Russia destroys it. And most importantly, we give other nations hope that Russia will not succeed in making war the new normal.
already on Tuesday, November 18th, the president of Ukraine has scheduled talks in Spain. Larissa Petruk for Frida TV channel.